In a forest in New Zealand, there is a tree stump. It is very old. Its trunk was cut through decades ago, and everything above the cut is gone. No branches, no leaves, nothing capable of reaching sunlight or producing food. By every rule of biology, this stump should be dead. And yet it is not. Scientists who examined it found something that stopped them completely. The stump is alive, not barely alive, genuinely, continuously, measurably alive. Its cells still functioning, still respiring, still doing the quiet chemical work of a living thing. And when they looked more closely, they discovered why. The surrounding trees were feeding it. Through the root system beneath the ground, through a network of fungal threads connecting root to root across the entire forest floor, the living trees around this stump had been passing it sugar and water and nutrients for decades, keeping it alive, long after it could offer anything in return. We do not fully understand why they do this. We do not know if the trees around that stump are aware, in any sense we would recognize, of what they are doing. What we know is only that they are doing it. That somewhere in New Zealand, right now, tonight, a ring of living trees stands around a stump that should have died decades ago, and quietly, through channels beneath the ground that no eye can follow, they continue to keep it breathing. And that is only the beginning of what forests know. Tonight, we are going to walk into one, slowly, without hurry, and simply listen. Your day is already behind you now. Whatever it held, whatever it asked of you, it belongs to a different hour entirely. A brighter, louder, more demanding version of the world that has no particular claim on this one. Here, at the edge of the forest, there is only this: the soft cooling of the evening air, the faint green smell of leaves releasing their quiet chemistry into the dusk, and the trees, standing in their patient rows, entirely unhurried, as they have been standing since long before this particular evening arrived. We are going to walk in now, slowly, and the forest is going to do what forests have always done, without being asked. It is going to hold the silence for us and let everything else gently settle. We take the first step across the boundary, and something happens immediately. Something physical, something real, and something entirely soft. The temperature shifts, not dramatically and not all at once, but in the way that a room changes when you step from sunlight into shade, a gentle, immediate yielding of the warmth that had been following us across the open ground. The air here, in these first few steps beneath the outermost branches, is cooler by several degrees than the air we left behind only moments ago. And this coolness did not come from wind, or from weather, or from any change in the evening above the canopy. It came from the forest itself. This is something forests do continuously, quietly, without any effort, simply by existing in the particular way that they exist. The canopy above us has been intercepting the sun's warmth all day, absorbing it into the leaves and bark and the dense green ceiling of branches before it could reach the ground below. And the forest floor, that deep, layered, endlessly complex surface of leaf litter and moss and soft, dark soil, has been releasing its own cool, water-laden air upward throughout the long afternoon, breathing it gently into the space between the roots and the lowest branches. The result is this: a soft, natural lowering of the temperature that greets everything that steps inside. A quiet, living welcome. Notice the ground beneath your feet now. At the edge, it was firm, compact and ordinary in the way that open ground tends to be, offering a hard and uncomplicated surface beneath each step. But here, only a short distance inside the tree line, the earth has changed entirely. The leaf litter begins gently at first, a thin scattering of last autumn's leaves, pale and soft and barely rustling as each step lands among them. And then, a little further in, it deepens. The accumulated layers of many autumns below our feet have built into something that gives gently, that absorbs the weight of each step rather than simply bearing it. The way a very old and very thick rug absorbs the sound of a quiet house. and the sound of each footstep has changed to match. Where it was sharp and clear on open ground, here it has become something muffled and soft, landing in the deep litter without announcement, absorbed before it can travel more than a few feet in any direction. And above the changed ground, the sound of the forest itself has shifted in a way that is worth resting inside for a moment. Because forests do not simply reduce sound the way a closed window reduces sound, by simply blocking its passage. They absorb it. Every trunk around us is, in its own way, a soft and patient receiver. The fibrous layers of bark, the dense and irregular wood beneath, the roughness of every branching surface. All of these take the sound waves that reach them and draw a little of each wave's energy into the wood itself, holding it there, releasing nothing back into the air. And the canopy above, dense and layered and filled with the countless small and irregular surfaces of individual leaves, scatters whatever sound rises toward it into so many overlapping directions that by the time it reaches the upper branches, it has already lost most of what it was carrying. Researchers who have measured this effect inside mature forests have found something rather remarkable. A well-established forest can reduce ambient noise by as much as 8 decibels compared to the open ground outside it. 8 decibels is not simply a number. It is the difference between a conversation and a library, between a street and a quiet room with no street outside it. And we are standing inside it now, inside this natural, living reduction of everything the open world carries in its noise. The sounds that reach us here are only the sounds that belong here. The soft, distant movement of water over smooth stones, somewhere in the forest's interior. The occasional, unhurried settling of a branch, far overhead, releasing the last of the day's accumulated warmth into the cooling evening air. And beneath both of these, the particular textured quality of a silence that is not empty at all, but full of the slow breathing of the forest, the faint movements of living things operating at a pace too gradual for any single moment to betray. Breathe in here, notice the air. It is different from the air behind us in ways that are real and measurable, even if they are difficult to name precisely. There is a dampness, not heavy, not uncomfortable, simply present, the way air carries a particular quality near water, even when the water itself is some distance away. Beneath that dampness, something green and living, the particular freshness of leaves releasing oxygen steadily into the cool interior air, as they have been doing through the entire long day, without pause or urgency. And beneath that, something older and darker and richer, the smell of the forest floor itself. Scientists have studied this smell carefully, and what they have found is worth knowing. The organisms living within healthy forest soil, bacteria, fungi, the countless microscopic communities of life that make up a single handful of old forest earth, release a chemical compound into the air above them when moisture reaches them, a compound with the rather beautiful scientific name of geosmin. This is petrichor, the smell of rain on living earth, and it is one of the oldest chemical signals in the biological world. Your nervous system encounters it and does something very specific in response. It registers safety, not consciously, not as a thought or a decision, simply as a quiet, deeply embedded signal carried within your body from a time when your species spent its nights in places exactly like this one, cool and sheltered and smelling of living soil and entirely undisturbed. And layered within the petrichor, drifting from the bark of every tree within reach, is something else entirely: terpenes, the volatile organic compounds that trees release continuously from their bark and their leaves and their needles, each species producing its own particular blend, each forest carrying its own specific atmospheric chemistry, shaped by which trees grow here, and how long they have stood, and how the canopy has arranged itself over the decades into its current particular pattern of shade and light. This forest, with its broad-leaved trees and its deep leaf litter and its soft interior air, carries a warm and rounded terpene blend, earthy and slightly sweet, and deeply familiar in a way that does not require memory to recognize. Your lungs are absorbing these compounds now, with each slow breath, passing them into your bloodstream, where they travel to the same receptors that respond to cortisol, the chemical your body produces under stress. And the terpenes, quietly, without any effort on your part, begin to lower it. This is not a metaphor. This is measurable, documented, replicable chemistry. The forest air is actively calming your nervous system, simply by being breathed. And the light here is unlike any light that falls in the open world. Look up, softly, without focusing on any particular point. The canopy above us has been slowly closing since we crossed the tree line, each step adding another layer of branches to the cover between us and the sky. And the sky itself, which was fully open and wide at the edge of the forest, has been disappearing gently, in pieces, replaced piece by piece with the quiet architecture of branches and leaves. Now, looking up, the sky exists only in small and irregular fragments, pale shapes between the leaves, shifting almost imperceptibly as the lightest movement of evening air stirs the highest branches. The Japanese have a word for this quality of light, komorebi. It has no direct translation in English, which is perhaps fitting for something that does not entirely translate into words in any language. It refers specifically to the light that moves through a forest canopy, the way it breaks into shafts and pools and gentle, shifting patches across the ground below, changing as the leaves move, never entirely the same from one breath to the next. And there is something in komorebi that no other quality of light quite carries. A warmth that is softer than direct warmth, a brightness that does not press against the eye, but simply rests within it. Watch it move across the forest floor around us. Not quickly, not in any way that the eye can follow if it tries to look directly at any single patch of moving light. But if you rest your gaze softly, without fixing on any particular point, without trying to see anything specific, the whole of the forest floor seems to breathe. The light expands and softens and draws back. The shadows deepen and then lighten and then deepen again, in a rhythm so slow and so continuous that it matches without any effort required the rhythm of breathing itself. The canopy sways very gently. A single leaf catches the last of the available light, holds it for a moment, releases it. The light shifts, the shadow returns, and the leaf settles. Somewhere in the forest's interior, the small stream continues its quiet movement over smooth stones. It has been moving in exactly this way for longer than this particular evening, longer than this particular season, following the same path it has been following through this same forest since long before any of the trees standing around us now had grown tall enough to cast their first shadow on the ground below. The leaf litter settles softly beneath each slow step. The cool air drifts between the trunks. The komorebi moves across the ground in its endless, slow breathing pattern. And the forest holds all of it. The light and the shadow and the soft ground and the ancient smell of living earth with the same patience and the same complete, undisturbed stillness that it has always held everything within it. We are inside now, fully inside. The open world is behind us. The temperature has settled. The sound has softened. The light moves slowly across the ground. Somewhere above us, a single leaf turns in the last of the evening air. The roots of the trees extend beneath our feet, deeper than the trunks are tall, moving through the soft earth in their slow and patient directions. The forest is breathing, very slowly, and the network beneath the ground is carrying whatever it carries, from root to root, from tree to tree, in the dark below the leaf litter, unhurried, as it always has, as it will long after this particular evening has passed. The komorebi fades, the last light withdraws, and the forest settles into its night, quietly, completely. We have been walking for a while now, and the forest around us has deepened quietly with every slow step we have taken through the leaf litter and the cool, still air between the trunks. The canopy above is fully closed now. The sky exists only in the smallest fragments, pale shapes between leaves, fading gently with the last of the evening. And beneath our feet, though we cannot feel it, something extraordinary is happening. Something that has been happening without interruption since long before any of these trees were tall enough to cast a shadow. Something so slow and so quiet and so completely hidden from ordinary sight that it went entirely unnoticed by science until only a few decades ago. Beneath us, running through the dark soil in every direction, connecting root to root across the entire floor of this forest, there is a network. Not a simple network, not a loose collection of roots occasionally brushing against one another in the dark. Something far older than that, far more intricate, far more deliberate in its own slow and patient way than anything we would have predicted. Tonight, we are going to travel down into it, slowly, without any urgency at all, simply following the threads wherever they lead us. Let your body settle a little deeper into wherever it rests tonight. Allow the weight of your shoulders to release gently, the way a branch releases a raindrop. Not all at once, simply softly, when the time is right. You do not need to hold anything up right now. The forest is holding everything around us. It has been holding it, in fact, for a very long time. And it is very good at it. To understand what lives beneath this forest floor, we need to begin with something very small. Smaller, in fact, than anything visible to the unaided eye. A single fungal thread. Scientists call it a hypha, from the Greek word for web, and it is one of the most slender structures in the living world, thinner than a human hair by a factor of 20 or more. So fine and so pale that a handful of soil full of them appears, to the eye, simply like ordinary soil. And yet, within a single teaspoon of healthy old-growth forest soil, the total length of fungal threads, if they could somehow be removed and laid end to end, would stretch for several kilometers. Not meters, kilometers. From a single teaspoon of earth, held within it, invisible, patient, threading through every available space between the soil particles, touching the roots of plants, drifting through the dark in directions too intricate and too fine to map. These threads, these pale, wandering hyphae, are the beginning of something that scientists have come to call the mycorrhizal network, a name that means, simply, fungus and root joined together. And the joining is the heart of the entire story. Because what happens when a fungal thread meets the root tip of a tree is not simply contact, it is partnership. A partnership so old and so deeply embedded in the history of life on this planet that the two parties involved could not, in many cases, survive without one another. The fungus, drifting through the soil in its slow and patient way, extracts minerals from the earth, phosphorus and nitrogen, and other compounds that tree roots on their own could never reach efficiently, and passes them into the root tip directly through the point of contact between them. And the tree, in return, passes carbon downward from its leaves, sugar produced through photosynthesis, the slow alchemy of sunlight and air that happens silently in the canopy high above us, into the fungal thread, feeding it, sustaining it, giving it the energy it needs to continue its slow and wandering growth through the dark soil below. A trade, ancient and quiet and continuous. Minerals moving one way, carbon moving the other. Each party receiving what it cannot produce alone. Each party giving what the other cannot gather on its own. This partnership is not new. It is not a recent development or a recent discovery of biology, or something that evolved alongside the forests we recognize today. Fossils preserved in ancient rock have revealed fungal threads intimately entwined with the roots of some of the very first land plants that ever existed. Plants that lived and grew and spread their slow green influence across the bare rock of a very young Earth, approximately 450 million years ago. 450 million years before flowers existed, before leaves existed in the form we would recognize, before anything resembling a tree had grown tall enough to cast a shadow on any surface, anywhere on this planet. The partnership was already there, already practiced, already refined by millions of years of slow, patient evolution into something that worked so well and worked so completely that life on land may have depended on it from the very beginning. And it did not stop there. As plants grew taller and forests grew denser, and the roots of different trees spread through the same soil and reached the same networks of fungal threads, something else began to happen. Something that took science much longer to notice, because the fungal threads did not simply connect each tree to the fungi living around its own roots. They connected each tree to every other tree, whose roots happened to reach the same network. And the network, expanding with each new connection, each new tree root brushing against a new fungal thread, and joining the slow trade of minerals and carbon, grew larger and more connected, and more capable of carrying something far more interesting than simply food. Researchers working in the forests of British Columbia in Canada began, in the 1990s, to notice something strange. They were measuring the movement of carbon through forest soil, labeling it with a particular form of carbon that could be tracked as it moved through living systems. And what they expected to find was relatively simple. Carbon moving from the leaves of a tree downward through its own root system, cycling through the soil immediately around it, and remaining, for the most part, within the reach of that single tree. What they found was something else entirely. The carbon was moving between trees, not staying within the root system of the tree that had produced it, not staying within the soil immediately surrounding that tree's base, moving outward through the fungal network into the roots of other trees entirely. Trees that had produced no carbon of their own, young seedlings growing in the deep shade beneath the canopy where sunlight barely reached, unable to photosynthesize enough to sustain themselves, were receiving carbon produced by the large trees growing above them. The large trees were feeding the small ones through the network, without any visible connection above the ground, without any mechanism that any previous understanding of how trees work would have predicted. Scientists came to call this the Wood Wide Web, a name that arrived with a kind of gentle inevitability, combining the ancient word for the material of trees with the newer idea of a vast, invisible, interconnected system through which information and resources flow in every direction at once. And the more carefully researchers looked at it, the more they found within it, because it was not simply carbon that the network carried. Water moved through it as well. Phosphorus, nitrogen, the chemical building blocks of life itself, moving between trees in the slow, continuous, underground trade that the fungal threads had been facilitating for longer than any forest we know had existed. Trees growing in wetter parts of the forest, where water gathered in the soil and roots could absorb more than immediate needs required, were passing that surplus water through the network to trees growing in drier ground nearby. Trees in full sun, producing carbon in abundance through photosynthesis, were sending it downward and outward to seedlings and small trees growing in shade too deep for their own photosynthesis to sustain them. And the network, carrying all of this in its slow and patient threads, was not simply a passive pipe. It was, in some way, that researchers are still carefully working to understand. Something closer to a living system of distribution, moving resources from where they were available to where they were needed, continuously, without instruction, without awareness as far as we know, simply following the quiet logic of chemistry and connection, as it has followed that logic for hundreds of millions of years. Settle a little further into the quiet here. The forest above us is still. The kohlrabi has faded with the last of the evening light, and the forest floor around us now rests in the cool and undisturbed dark of a forest night. And beneath us, beneath the leaf litter, beneath the soft and layered soil, at the depth where the fine pale threads run most densely, the network is still carrying whatever it carries. Right now, in the dark, without any need for the light above to continue, without any awareness of the night that has settled over the forest floor, simply moving, as it always moves, along its pale and patient threads, connecting root to root across the whole of this forest in a pattern so intricate and so completely hidden from ordinary sight that the forest above it, for all its visible complexity, is only the smallest and most visible part of what this place actually is. Most of what this forest is exists beneath the surface, in the dark, in the cold, in the quiet interiors of the soil, in the slow trade of minerals and carbon and water between roots that have no other way to reach what they need, in the pale threads, thinner than a human hair, running in every direction at once through a teaspoon of earth, a handful of soil, a forest floor stretching in every direction further than any of us could easily walk before morning, and the threads run beneath your feet as well. Right now, drifting through the soil in the same slow directions they have always followed, moving whatever they are moving, connecting whatever they are connecting, in the dark, in the quiet. Underneath everything, the network does not rest. It does not pause for the night, the way the birds above us have paused, settling into their quiet roosts somewhere in the middle canopy. It does not slow for the evening, the way the photosynthesis above has slowed. The leaves above us, having closed their chemical work for the day, with the fading of the available light, the threads simply continue, pale and slow and entirely unhurried, carrying the slow trade of the forest through every hour of every night, as they have carried it through every night since the first mycorrhizal partnership formed in the root of the first plant that ever pushed upward through the soil of the very first land. Some of the threads beneath us are very old, not old in the way that a tree is old, measurable in rings and seasons, a growth that can be traced backward year by year to a particular germination in a particular autumn. The fungal network does not work that way. It does not have a beginning in any single place, or a single founding thread from which everything else grew outward. It grows and dies back and regrows continuously, threading itself through the soil in response to where roots are and where minerals lie and where the slow logic of its own chemistry leads it. But the network itself, the pattern of connection it creates, the partnership with roots that it sustains, is ancient in a way that goes beyond the age of any single thread or any single tree. It is ancient in the way that a practice is ancient, a way of doing things that has been carried forward, unchanged in its essential nature, through hundreds of millions of years of changing forests and changing climates and changing compositions of soil, simply because it worked, and has continued to work, and is working right now, beneath us, in the dark, in the quiet threads, drifting through the soil in every direction at once. The forest above is very still now. A single leaf settles somewhere in the middle distance. The air between the trunks has cooled into its full night temperature, and beneath the leaf litter, beneath the soft soil, beneath the layers of accumulated forest history, pressed gently into the earth below our feet, the pale threads continue their slow and patient wandering, moving through the dark, carrying what they carry, as they have always carried it, quietly, without urgency, without end. Rest here a while, in the quiet above the network, in the cool and undisturbed dark of the forest night. There is nothing needed from you right now. Not by the forest, not by the network, not by anything at all. Simply the soft ground beneath you, and the cool air around you, and the pale threads, somewhere below, drifting through the dark in their slow and ancient directions, still carrying, still connecting, still, as always, quietly, on. We are still in the forest, still resting within the same cool and undisturbed dark that has been holding us since we first stepped across the tree line tonight. The canopy above is very still. The leaf litter beneath us has long since settled, and somewhere far below the surface, in the pale and patient threads of the mycorrhizal network, the slow trade of the forest continues in its quiet and unhurried way. But tonight, in this chapter, we are going to travel a little deeper into that network, not further down into the soil, further into the story of how the network works, and what it reveals when you follow its threads far enough about how this forest has always taken care of itself. If you were to map the mycorrhizal network beneath a mature old-growth forest, if you could somehow make visible all the pale threads running through the soil in every direction, all the connections between root tip and fungal hypha, all the pathways along which carbon and water and minerals have been moving, slowly and continuously, for decades, you would not find a uniform web. You would not find a simple, evenly distributed mesh of connections, each tree connected equally to every other, the whole network spread in a smooth and democratic pattern across the forest floor. What you would find is something more recognizable than that. You would find hubs. Certain trees, the oldest trees, the largest trees, the trees that have been standing in this forest the longest, and have had the most time to build their root systems outward into the widest possible reach of the surrounding soil. These trees are connected to a far greater number of other trees than any of the younger, smaller trees around them. Their root systems are vast. Their connections to the fungal network are dense and complex beyond easy counting. And the pathways through which carbon and water and chemical signals flow through the network converge again and again at the roots of these particular trees. Scientists who study forest ecology call them hub trees, or sometimes with a warmth that the science does not usually allow itself, by a different name entirely, mother trees. Allow your breathing to slow gently here. Allow the weight of your body to settle a little more fully into the surface beneath you. The forest is very quiet, and we are going to rest here for a while, in the cool and undisturbed dark, and simply listen to what the oldest trees in this forest have been quietly doing for longer than any of us have been alive. A mother tree is not simply a large tree. It is not simply an old tree, though it is certainly both of those things. What distinguishes a mother tree is her connectivity, the reach of her root system, spreading outward through the soil over decades and centuries of slow and patient growth, has brought her into contact with the fungal network at so many points, and along so many separate pathways, that she sits at the center of a web of connection that may include hundreds of other trees. Some of those connections are to trees of her own species, growing nearby. Some are to trees of entirely different species, whose roots have simply found themselves in the natural slow spreading of a forest's underground life, touching the same fungal threads. And some of those connections, the ones that researchers have found most quietly remarkable, are to trees that are her own offspring, seedlings that have germinated from her own seeds, small, young trees, growing in the shade and soil of the forest around her, still too young and too small to sustain themselves entirely through their own photosynthesis. And these, her own seedlings, she treats differently from all the rest. The research that revealed this took many years of careful, patient work. Suzanne Simard, a forest ecologist working in the forests of British Columbia, spent decades tracing the movement of carbon through forest soil, following the slow pathways of the mycorrhizal network, with the patience that the network itself seemed to demand of anyone who wished to understand it properly. And what she found, as the data accumulated slowly across those years, was something that the science of forests had not previously prepared itself to encounter. Mother trees were not simply connected to the network, they were directing resources through it. Specifically, they were directing resources toward the seedlings that carried their own genetic material, their own offspring, at rates that significantly exceeded the resources they sent to the seedlings of other trees. The mother tree was recognizing her own children beneath the ground through the silent chemical language of the mycorrhizal network, and she was feeding them. How does a tree recognize its own offspring? This is a question that the science answers carefully, with the appropriate caution about applying language borrowed from human experience to processes that happen without neurons, without a brain, without anything resembling the kind of awareness we associate with recognition. What the research suggests is that the chemistry of a mother tree's root system and the chemistry of her seedlings' root systems share a particular molecular signature, a similarity arising from their shared genetic material, and that the mycorrhizal network, responding to the chemistry at each root tip it connects, carries more carbon and more water along the pathways, connecting roots of similar chemistry than along other pathways. The network, in other words, responds to the genetic relationship between trees by preferentially routing resources along the connections that link them. Whether this constitutes recognition in any meaningful sense is a question the science leaves carefully open, but the result is unmistakable. The seedlings of a mother tree, growing in her shade, receiving less light than the seedlings growing at the forest's edge, are not left to struggle through their early growth on the photosynthesis they can manage for themselves. They are supplemented, gently, continuously, through the pale threads beneath the soil, along the pathways of a network that their own roots have joined simply by growing into the same ground their mother has occupied for decades. Rest in this for a moment. The cool air is very still around us. The forest floor is very quiet, and beneath us, in the dark soil, a mother tree is doing what she has always done, routing her abundance gently outward, toward the small and the young and the still growing, without instruction, without awareness, in the way we understand awareness, simply because the chemistry of the network leads her there, simply because the threads connect. There is something else that researchers have observed as well, something that becomes relevant when a mother tree is under stress, when drought comes to a forest, when the summer grows long and the soil moisture drops and the water moving through the network becomes scarcer than usual. Mother trees do not simply hold their resources within their own root systems. They increase their output through the network. They send more carbon, more water, more of whatever they have, outward through the fungal threads to the smaller trees and seedlings connected to them, as though in difficult times the network becomes more important, not less, as though the mother tree responds to scarcity in the forest around her, not by hoarding, but by sharing more generously than before. The science is careful, as always, not to attribute intention to this process, but the pattern is consistent, and the effect is real. And in a forest that has been standing for long enough to have survived many seasons of drought, many long and difficult summers, the mother trees at the center of its network have been responding in this same quiet and generous way for longer than any of us has been here to observe it. Breathe in softly here. The air around us is cool and faintly sweet with the scent of bark and damp soil. The forest holds its long, slow silence. And we are going to move now gently toward the most quiet and the most profound part of this chapter. The part that the forest does not announce. The part that happens slowly, over months and sometimes years, in the deep soil and the pale threads, watched by no one. A mother tree does not live forever. No tree does. However ancient, however vast, however deeply connected to the network beneath her, a time comes eventually when the slow processes of growth and repair and renewal that have sustained her for decades or centuries begin imperceptibly at first, and then with gathering certainty to fall behind. Perhaps a drought has persisted too long. Perhaps the competition for light in the canopy above has finally shifted in ways that her own slowly aging leaves can no longer overcome. Perhaps the organisms within her bark have found, after all those years of successful resistance, a foothold that her chemistry can no longer dislodge. Whatever the reason, the process is always the same: slow, quiet, entirely undramatic. A mother tree does not fall all at once. She does not stop suddenly in a single day or a single season. She withdraws gradually from the outermost branches first, drawing her resources back toward the center. As the outer growth becomes too costly to maintain, her canopy thins. Her leaves, in their final seasons, fall a little earlier in autumn and emerge a little later in spring. Her growth rings, in the years approaching the end, are thinner than any ring she laid down in the long, rich centuries of her full maturity. And the network beneath her, sensing the changes in her root chemistry, begins to adjust to a forest that will, before very long, need to exist without her. And here is what happens. Here is the part that researchers did not predict, and that the forest has apparently always known. As a mother tree's root system weakens and her connection to the mycorrhizal network begins to loosen, the carbon she has accumulated over her lifetime, stored in her wood, in her bark, in the deep and complex chemistry of her root system, begins to move outward, not quickly, not all at once, slowly, the way everything in this forest moves, the way the marine snow moves downward through the ocean, the way the rings of a tree accumulate, one quiet fraction at a time, over weeks and months, and in some cases the better part of a year. The carbon that she has gathered across centuries of photosynthesis, the stored product of all those long summers of light and all those careful winters of slow, cold, patient persistence, travels outward through the fungal threads into the root systems of the trees around her, into her seedlings, into her neighbors, into the young trees that will grow into the spaces left by her canopy when she is gone. Her final act is a gift, not chosen, not deliberate in any way that we would recognize as deliberation, but the effect of it is indistinguishable in its outcome from something very much like generosity. Allow your body to grow heavier now. Allow your thoughts to drift, the way leaves drift from a high branch in the first stillness of autumn, slowly, without direction, simply drifting. The forest is very dark around us, very still. And somewhere in this darkness, in a forest not so very different from this one, a mother tree is in the long and quiet process of her final giving. Her root system is releasing, steadily, the carbon of decades and centuries into the pale threads beneath her. The seedlings around her are receiving it. The young trees are growing, just slightly faster than they might have grown on their own, nourished by the slow and quiet dissolving of their mother into the network that connects them all. She does not know that she is doing this. She has never known anything in the way that knowing requires a mind to hold it, but the forest knows it. In the way that the forest knows everything, through chemistry, through connection, through the slow and unhurried logic of the mycorrhizal network, which does not require awareness to carry something precious from where it is to where it is needed. The threads run very deep here. The soil is very soft. The air above the forest floor is perfectly still and cool, and carrying within it the faint and ancient smell of living earth that we noticed when we first walked in so many quiet minutes ago. And somewhere beneath us, a mother tree's roots are still connected to the network, still warm with the last of her chemistry, still, in their slow and patient way, releasing what they have, to the seedlings, to the young trees, to the forest that will grow in her canopy's place, tall and green and full of its own slow seasons. Long after the last trace of her trunk has softened into the soil and become, itself, part of the forest floor that the next generation of seedlings will grow from. The forest is a long story, and no part of it ends completely. It simply changes form, slowly, quietly, in the dark, in the pale threads, in the chemistry of root systems that are always, in one way or another, connected. The night is very deep now. The canopy is very still. A single leaf has come to rest on the forest floor nearby, settling without a sound into the soft and undisturbed litter around it. And somewhere below, the network continues, carrying what it carries, connecting what it connects, in the quiet way it has always carried, in the unhurried way it has always connected. Through the dark, through the cold, through the long and patient night, simply rest here, in the cool and the quiet, above the threads, below the canopy, in the middle of the forest's long and ancient breathing. There is nothing more that needs to be understood tonight, only the dark, and the roots, and the slow, continuous, generous passing of what each tree has gathered. Onward, always onward, into the forest, into the night, into the soft and patient future that the mother trees have always been quietly building. Without asking, without resting, without end, we are still here, still resting in the same cool and undisturbed quiet that has been holding us since we first beneath the canopy, so many slow and gentle minutes ago. The forest floor is soft beneath us. The air between the trunks is very still, and somewhere far below the surface, in the pale mycorrhizal threads we visited in our last chapter, the slow trade of the forest continues, as it always continues, carrying carbon and water and the quiet chemistry of connection from root to root through the dark soil, without urgency, without pause, without any need for the night above it to be anything other than what it is. But tonight, in this chapter, we are going to travel in a different direction, not downward into the soil, upward, into the air between the trees, into the invisible and unhurried space between one leaf and another. Because it turns out that the mycorrhizal network beneath the ground is not the only conversation happening in this forest. There is another one, older in some ways, carried not through fungal threads and root chemistry, but through the air itself, through the slow and ancient medium of the atmosphere that moves, barely perceptibly, between the trunks and branches and the countless individual leaves of a forest that has been quietly talking to itself for longer than any of us have been here to listen. Allow your body to grow a little heavier now. Allow the places where you rest to receive the full weight of you, the way the forest floor receives the weight of the leaf litter above it, completely, without resistance, without asking for anything to be different. The night is very quiet, the canopy is very still, and the air around us is full of something that our eyes cannot follow and our ears cannot hear, but that the leaves above us have been reading and responding to and speaking in for as long as there have been leaves on this planet to do so. To understand the language of leaves, we need to begin with the terpenes. We have already met them, briefly, in our first chapter. The volatile organic compounds that trees release continuously from their bark and their needles and the broad surfaces of their leaves. The compounds that give a forest its particular smell, that settle into the air of a forest interior and produce the particular ancient quality of calm that researchers have measured and documented and still find difficult to fully explain. We noted in that first chapter that terpenes lower cortisol, that they signal safety to the human nervous system in a way that does not require thought or recognition, that your body absorbs them through each breath and responds to them in the quiet, pre-verbal way it responds to everything it has inherited from the very long time that your species spent living in places exactly like this one. But terpenes are far more than a smell, far more than a signal to the nervous systems of the animals that breathe forest air. For the trees that produce them, terpenes are something far older and far more specific than that. They are words, drifting up through the cool and still air of the forest, rising from the leaf surfaces above us into the space between the canopy and the open sky. A slow and invisible chemistry is moving tonight in every direction at once. Not quickly, not dramatically, simply the way molecules move through air, in the gentle, directionless dispersal of things too small to see, following the faint and shifting currents of whatever air movement exists between the branches, spreading outward from each leaf that releases them in an ever-widening sphere of chemistry that may, over the course of an hour or a still afternoon, travel tens of meters in every direction from its source. When the leaf that releases them is undisturbed, simply photosynthesizing in the ordinary way, absorbing light and releasing oxygen, and going about the quiet business of being a leaf, the terpenes it releases carry a particular chemical signature, a resting signature, a steady baseline that has remained more or less constant since that particular tree came into full leaf in the spring. A chemical message that translates, in the language of the forest, to something very close to simply, all is well. But when something disturbs a leaf, when the surface of a leaf is broken or bent, or when the tree that carries it begins to experience the early chemistry of stress, a long drought, a shift in soil moisture, the first subtle signs of a change in conditions that the tree's chemistry has detected long before anything visible has occurred, the terpene signature changes. Different compounds are released in different proportions, in combinations that carry, within their chemistry, something more specific than the resting baseline, something closer to, something has changed here, something closer to, pay attention to this. And the leaves of the trees growing nearby, their surfaces permeable to the air around them, absorbing molecules with each slow exchange of gases that is the ordinary business of leaf chemistry, receive this changed signature, read it, in the silent way that leaves read chemistry, through the responses of the molecules embedded in their surfaces, and begin, quietly, and without any visible sign that anything has happened at all, to change their own chemistry in response. This is the language of leaves, not a language of sounds or signals or anything that moves between the trees in a way that any eye can follow. A language of molecules, drifting on air so still it barely deserves the name air, dispersing through the forest interior in their slow and invisible way, carrying information that has been refined over hundreds of millions of years of forest life into a system of chemical communication so effective that it operates across distances no root system could bridge, in timeframes no mycorrhizal network could match, reaching every leaf on every tree within the slow dispersal radius of the releasing source. Researchers who have studied this process have found something that, when you first encounter it, seems almost too quiet and too strange to be true. Trees that have received the airborne chemical signals of a stressed neighbor, even without any physical connection to that neighbor, even when their root systems have never touched, even when the only link between them is the slow drift of molecules on still air, begin to produce, within their own leaf tissue, compounds that make them less vulnerable to whatever the signal suggested was worth preparing for. They reinforce their cell walls. They produce compounds that alter the chemical composition of their leaves in ways that make them less palatable, less nutritious, more chemically complex than they were before the signal arrived. They do this before anything has reached them, before anything has touched their leaves or their bark or their roots, simply because the air around them carried, in its invisible and drifting way, the chemical news of a neighbor's experience. Settle a little deeper into the quiet here. The forest above us is very still. The leaves, each one a thin and living surface stretched across a framework of veins that carry water up from the roots and sugar down toward the branches, are resting in the cool night air, not photosynthesizing now, not in the active, light-driven way of the daytime, simply existing in the cool dark, their stomata, the tiny pores on their undersides, partly closed, conserving moisture through the long night hours, maintaining the slow baseline chemistry of a leaf at rest. And even now, even in this nighttime stillness, the air around them is not entirely empty of their chemistry. The terpene release slows after dark, but it does not stop entirely. A forest at night still carries, in the air between its trunks and branches, the faint and lingering signatures of everything its leaves have been saying through the long day just ended. A slow, dispersing record of the chemistry of this particular afternoon, drifting gently through the cool night air, fading gradually as the molecules spread and separate and find their way, eventually, beyond the reach of any leaf that might receive them. By morning, when the stomata open again with the returning light and the leaves resume their full chemical activity, the night air will have cleared. A fresh day of slow conversation will begin. But we are getting ahead of ourselves, perhaps, because there is something more in the language of leaves that deserves to be rested in fully before we move on. Something that brings the story of this chemical conversation into contact with a very old and very particular kind of wonder. The compounds that trees release into the air when their chemistry shifts, the specific volatile molecules that carry the message of stress or change from one tree's leaf surface into the air, and onward to the leaf surfaces of its neighbors, are not new. They are not a recent evolutionary development. The fossil record of plant chemistry, preserved in amber and in the chemical signatures embedded in ancient rock, suggests that this kind of airborne signaling has been occurring in plant communities since long before the first tree grew tall enough to cast a meaningful shadow, long before flowers, long before leaves of the broad and familiar shape we would recognize, long before any of the trees standing in this particular forest tonight had evolved from the simpler plant communities that preceded them. The chemistry of airborne plant communication is ancient in the way that only the most enduring and most essential adaptations are ancient. Ancient not because it never changed, but because it worked so well from so early in the history of plant life that what changed was always only the refinement, the deepening, the gradual elaboration of a system whose essential logic, one plant's chemistry, reaching another plant's chemistry through the air between them, has remained unchanged for longer than the imagination can comfortably hold. Breathe in softly here. Allow the air of this forest to settle fully into your lungs. Allow the terpenes, still present in the cool night air, faint and slow and drifting on whatever barely perceptible currents move through the still interior of the forest, to be received by your body in the way your body has always received them, quietly, without interpretation, without the need for any part of you to understand or name what is happening. Simply the ancient signal, drifting on ancient air, reaching the ancient chemistry of a nervous system that spent a very long time in forests exactly like this one, and responding as it has always responded, with a loosening, a settling, a slow and complete release of whatever the day required you to carry, drifting outward from you now, the way terpenes drift outward from a leaf at rest, dispersing, spreading, becoming part of the air. The deep drift begins here, and from this point, we are simply going to wander through the leaves, slowly, without any particular destination, resting in the slow and ancient beauty of what a leaf is, and what it does, and what it has been doing for longer than any forest we know has existed. A single leaf. Turn your attention to a single leaf somewhere above us in the canopy. You cannot see it in this darkness, but it is there. A broad, thin surface stretched across a network of veins that branch and rebranch until they reach into every part of the leaf surface, carrying water up from the roots below and sugar toward the branches above, maintaining the quiet circulation that keeps the leaf alive through every moment of every day and every quiet hour of every night. Its surface is smooth in places and slightly textured in others, depending on the species of tree that carries it, the conditions in which it grew, the particular season of its development. On its underside, invisible to any eye looking from below, the stomata are barely open tonight. Tiny pores, each one surrounded by 2 guard cells that swell and shrink in response to the moisture and chemistry of the leaf's internal environment, controlling how much gas passes through, how much carbon dioxide enters, how much oxygen and water vapor leave. In the daytime, they open wide with the available light, allowing the full exchange of gases that photosynthesis requires. In the night, they narrow, conserving moisture, allowing only the slow, minimal exchange that the leaf's resting chemistry needs. They have been opening and closing in this rhythm since the first morning of this leaf's existence on the tree. They will continue opening and closing in this rhythm until the leaf falls, steadily, quietly, without any awareness of the cycle they sustain. And from the surface of this leaf, drifting upward into the cool air above the canopy and outward through the space between the branches, the slow and invisible release continues even now. Terpenes, water vapor, the quiet chemical exhale of a leaf at rest, moving through the night air, drifting away from the leaf that released them, dispersing into the dark forest interior around us, touching gently the leaf surfaces of every neighboring tree within their slow and spreading reach, carrying, in their particular molecular signature, the news of this particular leaf's particular evening. All is well. The chemistry is steady, the night is cool and undisturbed, and the forest, receiving this news from 1,000 leaves at once, from 100 trees in every direction, holds it the way it holds everything, without comment, without drama, without any response that the eye could follow or the ear detect, simply absorbing, simply continuing, in the ancient and unhurried way that forests have always continued. Somewhere above us, a leaf turns very slightly on its stem, not from wind, simply from the slow and barely perceptible circulation of air within the forest interior, the tiny thermal differences between the cooler air near the ground and the slightly warmer air trapped between the middle canopy and the higher branches, creating a gentle, slow convection that moves the forest air upward through the night in a drift so faint that only a leaf on a long and flexible stem would register it. The leaf turns, holds its new angle for a moment, and then, as the faint convection shifts in some direction too subtle to name, turns back, or does not, simply resting now in whatever orientation the night has placed it. Its stomata barely open, its chemistry slow and steady, its terpenes drifting outward from its surface into the dark air around it, carrying their ancient, quiet message. All is well, all is well, all is well. Allow your breathing to slow to its own natural rhythm now. There is no particular pace required, no depth that needs to be achieved, simply the breath, moving in and out in whatever way the body finds most easy and most natural tonight. The forest has been breathing for much longer than any of us. It will breathe long after tonight, and right now, in this cool and undisturbed dark, our breathing and the forest's slow chemistry are occupying the same air, the same molecules, the same ancient atmosphere that has been circulating through forests, exactly like this one for longer than forests have had names. The canopy sways very gently, a single, slow movement, barely perceptible, as though the forest has taken one long and comfortable breath of its own, allowing its highest branches to shift by degrees too small for any eye to follow, and then settling back into stillness, back into the cool and undisturbed quiet of the deep forest night. The language of leaves does not stop with stress signals and airborne chemistry. There is something more to it, something quieter still, something that researchers have only recently begun to appreciate. Trees communicate through the air not only in moments of change or stress, they communicate in stillness too. The simple, continuous, resting terpene release of a healthy tree on an ordinary afternoon is itself a message that the neighboring trees receive and incorporate into their own chemical baseline, a steady, continuous, almost inaudible signal of presence. I am here, I am well. The air between us is shared, and in a forest that has been standing for long enough, where the same trees have been releasing their chemistry into the same air and absorbing each other's chemistry for decades, this resting signal becomes something very close to familiarity. Not in the way that familiarity requires memory or recognition or any of the cognitive machinery we associate with knowing a neighbor, but in the purely chemical sense, the way that two elements that have been present in the same solution for long enough slowly reach an equilibrium, a shared chemistry, a shared air, a forest interior that carries, in its invisible and drifting atmosphere, the combined and overlapping chemical signatures of every tree that grows within it. All of them present in the air at once, all of them drifting on the same slow currents, all of them reaching, in their quiet and unhurried way, the leaf surfaces of every other tree within their reach. The night is very deep now. The canopy is very still. The leaf above us has not moved for a long while, and the air between us and it carries, in its invisible way, the last slow drift of the evening's chemistry. Terpenes, water vapor, the quiet exhale of 1,000 leaves resting in the cool dark, the ancient signal, drifting, all is well. The forest holds its long and patient silence. The stomata on the underside of every leaf are very nearly closed. The mycorrhizal threads below the surface are still carrying, slowly, whatever they carry. The mother trees are still sending their quiet abundance outward through the network. And the air between the branches and the leaves and the trunks and the ground carries, all of it, the invisible and unhurried chemistry of a forest that has been talking to itself for a very long time. Not loudly, not urgently, not in any way that requires anything of us, simply the ancient conversation continuing, as it has always continued, in the dark, in the cool, in the quiet drifting air of the deep forest night. Allow the last of your thoughts to drift now, the way terpenes drift from a leaf at rest, simply outward, without direction, without urgency, dispersing into the dark around you, becoming part of the air. The forest is very still, the leaves are resting, the chemistry is slow and steady, and everything in the quiet and ancient air of this undisturbed night is exactly as it has always been, gentle, drifting, ancient, still. We are still here, still resting in the same cool and undisturbed quiet of this deep forest night, with the leaf litter soft beneath us, and the canopy barely moving above, and the slow chemistry of the forest air drifting around us in its ancient and invisible way. The terpenes are still dispersing from the leaves above. The mycorrhizal threads are still carrying, somewhere far below us in the dark soil, whatever they carry. The mother trees are still sending their quiet abundance outward through the network as they have always sent it, without urgency and without pause. And the forest itself, the whole vast and breathing organism of it, is doing what it has been doing through every night of every year of its entire long existence. It is simply waiting, not impatiently, not in the way that waiting requires something to wait for. Simply existing in the particular way that trees exist, which is to say entirely and deeply, and on a timescale that has nothing whatsoever to do with the timescale that our days and our hours and our years are built from. And tonight, in this chapter, We are going to rest inside that time scale as fully as we can and allow it to do what it has always done to any mind that allows itself to be held within it. Slow everything down until the smallest and most ordinary moment feels wide enough to simply disappear into. Let your body grow heavier now. Let the places where you rest receive the full and comfortable weight of you, without any effort on your part to assist or adjust. Simply settle. The way a leaf settles onto the forest floor after its long, slow, turning fall from the branch above, without resistance, without direction, simply downward, into the soft and patient dark. There is a tree growing in California. It grows on a slope above the Redwood Creek in a grove that has been standing, in one form or another, for longer than any written record of anything that human hands have built or said or recorded. It is called a coast redwood, and it is, by any reasonable measure, one of the most extraordinary living things on the surface of this earth. Not because it is loud or dramatic or fast, precisely because it is none of those things. This particular tree, standing quietly on its Californian slope, has been growing for somewhere between 500 and 700 years. 5 to 7 centuries of slow and patient upward movement, adding to its height every year by an amount so small that measuring it would require instruments, not eyes. And yet the accumulated result of those centuries of growth has produced something of extraordinary dimensions. A trunk wider than a small room, a canopy high enough to hold its own weather, its own fog, its own moisture, its own community of plants and mosses and lichens and small creatures that live their entire lives in the branches far above the ground and have never needed to descend. And this tree is not old, by the standards of its own species. Coast redwoods have been known to live for more than 2,000 years. 2,000 years of the same slow upward movement. 2,000 years of the same patient accumulation of one ring laid gently over the last. 2,000 ring-thin summers. 2,000 ring-thin winters. Each one pressed, quietly and permanently, into the wood of a trunk that has been growing so slowly that the growth itself is invisible to any eye that does not have the luxury of waiting decades between each observation. Settle a little deeper into the quiet here. Allow the thought of 2,000 years to simply rest in your mind, without trying to hold it clearly. It will not hold clearly. It is not the kind of number that holds clearly in a human mind, and that is exactly the right response to it. The mind reaching for something it cannot fully grasp, and then softening and releasing and settling back into the simple and immediate fact of the cool night air and the still forest and the soft ground beneath. That softening is where we are going tonight. But there is another tree, growing in a different place, on a different slope, in a different kind of quiet. The White Mountains of California, high and cold, and swept by wind that has been crossing the same ridgelines for millennia, carry a particular kind of tree that most forests in the world do not. It is called the bristlecone pine, and it grows in the way that a bristlecone pine grows, which is to say, extraordinarily, achingly slowly. In a year of good rainfall and long warmth, a bristlecone pine might add a ring of wood to its trunk that is barely thicker than a human hair. In a year of drought, or late frost, or volcanic cloud, in a year when the conditions for growth were difficult or incomplete, the ring it adds might be barely visible at all. A fraction of a millimeter of new wood, laid quietly over the previous year's ring, and then covered, in its turn, by the next year's ring the following season. Slowly, quietly, without any awareness of the accumulation. In these same White Mountains, there is one particular bristlecone pine that has been growing in this slow and patient way for longer than almost anything else alive on this planet. Its name is Methuselah, and it is 4,850 years old. Allow that number to simply rest here for a moment. 4,850 years. This tree was already growing, already adding its nearly invisible annual rings to a trunk that was already centuries old. When the first great pyramids of Egypt were being built, when the Bronze Age was in its early centuries, when the oldest texts that any human hand has written were still new, Methuselah was already old then, already centuries into the patient accumulation of rings that has brought it to tonight. And tonight, on its cold and windswept slope in the White Mountains, it is still growing, still adding its fraction of a millimeter ring to the thousands of rings already laid down beneath it, still breathing, through its needles, the same high mountain air that it has been breathing since long before any civilization that survives into the present day had begun. It does not know how old it is. It does not experience its own age in any way that resembles experience as we understand it. It simply continues, in the only way it knows how to continue, slowly, without urgency, adding one ring, then another, in the patient dark of every winter and the slow warmth of every summer, and the long and ordinary passage of every year that separates one ring from the next. Let your thoughts grow slow and wide here. Let the ordinary sense of time that carries you through your days and your weeks and your years soften slightly. The way the light softens when the canopy closes overhead. You do not need to hold on to the usual pace of things tonight. There is no pace required here. Only the cool air and the still forest, and somewhere very far away on a cold and windswept slope, the faintest and most ancient of continued breathing. And within every tree, whether young or ancient, whether coast redwood or bristlecone pine, or the old and patient trees standing around us in this forest tonight, there is something that holds the entire record of what it has lived through. Every year, in every season, written into the wood in a language that requires no translation. The tree rings. A single tree ring is 1 year's growth. Not approximately 1 year, exactly 1 year. Beginning in the first warming of spring, when the cells of the cambium, the thin living layer just beneath the bark, begin to divide again after the long stillness of winter, producing new wood cells that are wide and pale, filled with the optimism of available water and rising warmth, and ending in the slowing of autumn, when the days shorten and the temperature drops and the cambium's cell division slows and finally stops, producing a band of small, dense, dark cells that press close together in the cooling season, forming the dark edge that separates this year's ring from the next. Wide and pale in spring, narrow and dark in autumn, 1 ring, 1 year, completed. And if the summer was warm and long and full of available water, the ring is wide. If the summer was cold or short or dry, if a drought came early, or a late frost arrived in a spring that had seemed to promise more than it delivered, the ring is narrow. A year of volcanic winter, when the ash of a distant eruption spread high into the atmosphere and reduced the sunlight reaching the forest for 1 or 2 growing seasons, leaves a ring so thin it requires magnification to distinguish from the rings around it. A year of extraordinary warmth, a summer that arrived early and stayed long and gave the tree every condition it needed for growth, leaves a ring of unusual width, a pale band of generous, well-nourished wood that stands noticeably wider than the years on either side of it. A tree that has been growing for 1,000 years carries, within its rings, an unbroken diary of 1,000 years of summers. Every drought recorded, every warm decade preserved, every volcanic winter, however distant the eruption that caused it, marked in wood that will outlast any other record of the same event. The tree did not write this diary with any intention of recording anything. It simply grew or grew less in response to whatever conditions each year provided. And the result of that growing and that growing less accumulated ring upon ring upon ring across the centuries is a record of extraordinary accuracy and extraordinary patience, without error, without omission, without any year ever missing from the sequence. Simply 1 ring, and then another, pressed quietly together in the dark interior of a trunk that has been adding to itself in its slow and patient way for as long as the forest has had this particular tree within it. Breathe in softly here. Allow the weight of the night to settle fully around you. The forest is very still. The rings within the trunks around us are very still. And the wood that holds them, cool and dense and undisturbed, is resting in the darkness in exactly the way it has always rested. Simply present, simply continuous, simply itself. And there is one more thing about trees and the way they move through time that deserves to be rested in fully before this chapter finds its close. Because trees do move, genuinely, physically, measurably move. Not in the way that animals move, with the swift and purposeful motion of a body responding to the immediate demands of its moment, but in the slow and patient way that only something operating on a timescale measured in decades can move. A tree grows toward light. This is something we have all observed in the simplest possible form. A houseplant leaning toward a window, a sapling bending toward the gap in a hedge where the afternoon sun comes through. But in a mature forest, this same process operates across spans of time that remove it entirely from the realm of anything the eye can follow. A tall tree, growing near the edge of a clearing, may spend decades in the slow and imperceptible process of redirecting its growth toward the available light of that clearing, not visibly leaning in any way that a single season of observation would reveal, but measurably across years and then decades, shifting the distribution of its new wood growth, adding more each season on the side that faces the light and slightly less on the shaded side, until, after a century of this slow and patient leaning, its trunk describes a curve so gradual that the tree itself appears straight to any eye that has not compared it to the straight vertical of its neighbors. It has been leaning for 100 years, and it will lean for 100 more. In the quiet dark, without urgency, without any awareness of the direction it is traveling, simply following the light, in the only way a tree knows how to follow anything. And there is a spiraling too, a slow, beautiful, barely perceptible spiral in the grain of the wood that forms as a tree grows taller, and the forces of wind and weight and the particular geometry of its own branching create a slight rotational tendency in the new wood laid down each season. In some trees, this spiral is so gradual that 10 years of growth might produce a rotation of the grain by only a single degree. In others, the spiral is more pronounced, wrapping the wood in a pattern that becomes visible only when the full trunk is viewed from a distance, the lines of the grain curving gently around the trunk, in the slow helix of a growth that has been turning imperceptibly for as long as the tree has stood. A living spiral, a form drawn in wood over centuries, completed so slowly that no single year of its drawing bears any visible resemblance to the finished curve, simply accumulating, one growth season at a time, in the dark, in the slow, in the ancient and unhurried patience of a tree that has nowhere to be but here, and nothing to do but grow. The night is very deep now, the canopy is very still above us, and the trunks around us, cool and dark, and carrying within them the rings of every year they have lived, stand in their patient rows in the undisturbed quiet of the forest, not moving, not in any way that tonight can show us, but moving in the way that only centuries can show, leaning very softly toward whatever light tomorrow will offer, spiraling very gently in the slow and living geometry of their own long growth, adding, somewhere within the cambium just beneath the bark, the first few cells of this year's ring. Let your thoughts go quiet now. There is nothing more that needs to be held or understood or followed tonight. The bristlecone pine on its cold slope is still growing. The coast redwood is still adding its slow fraction of height to a canopy that has been rising for centuries. The rings within the trees around us are simply present in the wood, undisturbed, complete, a record so patient and so permanent that it will outlast this night, And every night that follows, for as long as the forest stands, the forest is breathing, very slowly. The canopy is still, and somewhere in the dark interior of the trunk nearest to us, in the living layer just beneath the bark, a single new cell is dividing, quietly, adding one more fraction of one more ring to the long and patient record of this tree's slow existence, as it always has, as it always will, simply here, simply growing, in the gentle and ancient dark. Chapter 6, The Winter Stillness. We are still here, still resting in the same cool and undisturbed quiet of this deep forest, with the soft ground beneath us and the canopy somewhere above us, in the dark and the ancient chemistry of the forest air moving, very gently, in whatever slow and invisible currents the night has arranged between the trunks. But something has changed tonight, in the forest around us. Not dramatically, not in any way that announced itself or arrived with any urgency, simply in the way that the most profound changes in a forest always arrive, so slowly and so quietly, and over such a long period of gradual transition, that the change itself is almost impossible to locate in time. The forest has grown still. Not the ordinary stillness of a forest night, the deep and textured quiet we have been resting in through all the chapters that have brought us here. Something stiller than that. Something that carries within it a quality of hush, so complete and so ancient and so deeply embedded in the long annual rhythm of this particular forest, that the air itself seems to have slowed. The temperature has dropped. The last of the terpene release from the leaves above has ceased because the leaves above are gone. They fell weeks ago, slowly, one by one, in the long and gentle autumn release, each one spiraling down through the cool air in its own particular turning path before coming to rest on the forest floor below, adding itself to the deep and patient litter of everything that has fallen here before. And the canopy that once held them, that dense and intricate ceiling of green through which the kohlrabi drifted in slow and shifting pools of light, is bare now, open, allowing the night sky above to come all the way down into the forest in a way it could not do when the leaves were present. The stars, where the sky is clear, are visible between the branches, and the forest has settled, fully and completely, into its winter. Allow your breathing to slow, gently, here. Allow the cool air of this winter forest to rest around you without asking anything of you. There is nothing needed from you in a winter forest. There is very little needed from anyone. The forest itself is asking very little of itself tonight. That is, in its own quiet way, precisely the point. To understand what a winter forest is and what is happening within it on a night like this one, we need to understand something about dormancy. Not the dormancy of sleep exactly, though the two share a quality of deep and patient stillness that is difficult to separate entirely. Dormancy is the forest's winter economy, its long and deliberate choosing of less activity, less growth, less expenditure of the chemical and biological resources that the warmth and light of the growing season allowed the forest to accumulate in abundance. It is not a failure of the forest. It is not an absence of the forest. It is the forest doing something extraordinarily precise and extraordinarily ancient, with a degree of coordination across thousands of individual trees that no observer watching from the outside would ever suspect from simply looking at bare branches in cold air. The forest is not sleeping, it is waiting. And it has been waiting in exactly this way through every winter that has passed across this particular slope of ground since the first trees of this forest's current form took root here so many centuries ago. The preparation began long before tonight. It began in late summer, in fact, when the days were still long and warm and the canopy was still full and the forest was still in the full productivity of its growing season. Still photosynthesizing, still exchanging chemistry through the mycorrhizal network, still adding its imperceptible fractions of new wood to the rings growing just beneath the bark of every trunk. But the trees, reading the shortening of the days through their leaves, through the precise and exquisitely sensitive chemistry of their own cells, which respond to changes in the ratio of light to dark, with the same reliability that any instrument built for the same purpose would respond. The trees began, quietly and without any visible sign, to prepare. The mycorrhizal network began to slow its activity. The flow of carbon downward from the leaves into the roots decreased gently as the tree's photosynthesis began to wind toward its seasonal close. And within the leaves themselves, in the cells of every broad and green surface that had been exchanging gases and releasing terpenes and reading the airborne chemistry of its neighbors through the long productive months of spring and summer, a remarkable and very deliberate process began. The tree began to take back what it had invested in its leaves. The green color of a leaf, the deep, absorptive green that allows it to capture sunlight and drive the chemistry of photosynthesis, comes primarily from a molecule called chlorophyll. And chlorophyll, it turns out, is extraordinarily valuable. It contains nitrogen, and nitrogen is one of the most precious resources available to any tree, particularly in the cold months ahead, when the mycorrhizal network will be operating at only a fraction of its warm season capacity, and the flow of nutrients from the soil will slow to its winter minimum. And so the tree does something that requires no decision, no intention, no awareness of any kind, simply the quiet operation of biochemistry following the signals it has always followed. And it begins to dismantle the chlorophyll in its leaves, piece by careful piece, drawing the nitrogen back into the branch, and from the branch back into the trunk, and from the trunk downward into the root system, where it will be held through the winter in the cold storage of the tree's deepest wood. This is what autumn color is. Not the leaves turning to gold and amber and deep, slow red as a kind of celebration or farewell, but the leaves becoming gold and amber and deep, slow red because the green has been removed from them, because the chlorophyll has been carefully, methodically, completely withdrawn, leaving behind only the other pigments that were always present within the leaf's cells, but were invisible through the summer behind the overwhelming dominance of green. The yellows and golds were always there. The reds and the deep ambers were always there, hidden through all those warm and productive months, behind the green of a leaf doing its full and busy work. And now, as the green is drawn back into the tree and the leaf prepares for its release, these quieter colors become visible for the first and only time, a last long expression of what was always there but never seen. And then the leaf falls, not torn away, not broken by wind or frost, though wind and frost may come in the same season, released deliberately. The tree forms at the base of each leaf stem a particular layer of cells, the abscission layer, that weakens gently and completely over the days of autumn until the bond between the leaf and the branch has thinned to the point where the weight of the leaf itself, or the slightest movement of the air, is enough to complete the separation. The leaf does not fall because it has failed. It falls because the tree has finished with it, has taken from it everything of value that it had to offer, and has released it quietly into the air to drift downward in its own slow and particular path to the forest floor below, where it will rest and soften and slowly become part of the deep and patient litter from which this same tree's roots will draw their nourishment through the long, slow cycles of the years ahead. The leaf returns to the forest, as everything in time returns to the forest. Settle a little deeper into the quiet here. The winter forest is very still around us. The bare branches above, darker than the dark sky between them, reach outward in their complex and patient geometry, each one a record of the years of growth that produced it, each fork and branching and slight upward curve the result of decades of slow decision. the tree's chemistry redirecting its growth, season by season, toward the available light and away from the weight of ice and snow, building the particular architecture of this particular canopy over a span of time so long that the first branch was laid down in a year that none of us was alive to observe. And within those bare branches, within the trunk, within the root system extending through the cold soil far below us, the tree is not entirely still. It is doing the minimum. The cells of the cambium, which through spring and summer divided steadily in the production of new wood, have slowed almost to a stop. The stomata, which stood open through the growing season to allow the exchange of gases that photosynthesis requires, are now fully closed, sealed against the cold air, conserving the last of the moisture within the tree's tissues against the long, dry months of winter, when frozen ground cannot deliver water to the roots, and the air carries none of the soft humidity of the growing season. The mycorrhizal network below the surface has slowed its activity dramatically. The fungi, responding to the cold and to the reduced supply of carbon from the trees above, have pulled back into the warmest and deepest portions of the soil, maintaining a minimum of activity, waiting for the conditions that will allow them to resume the full trade of the growing season. The forest in every direction has drawn itself inward, not gone, simply inward, holding what it has, waiting for the light to return. There is something deeply restful in the quality of a winter forest at night, something that the full canopied forest of summer, for all its richness and its beauty and its extraordinary chemistry, cannot quite offer. Because the winter forest has nothing to do. It has released its leaves. It has drawn its resources inward. It has closed its stomata and slowed its cambium and reduced its mycorrhizal trade to its quiet winter minimum. And now it simply stands, in the cold and the dark, with a patience so complete and so ancient that the word patience barely reaches it. 1,000 trunks, standing in the undisturbed quiet of their own long dormancy, bare branches held upward into the cold sky, making no demands, performing no chemistry that the night does not require, simply present, simply waiting, simply here. And the snow, when it comes, completes the stillness. It falls, in the particular way that snow falls through a bare winter forest, without the canopy of leaves to intercept and alter its descent, directly down through the open air between the branches, settling on the upward-facing surfaces of every branch with a slow and careful accumulation, building, over the hours of a long and quiet snowfall, into the particular architecture of a snow-covered forest. Each branch bearing its own soft, white load, the smaller outermost branches bowed slightly, under a weight that is new and temporary, and will be gone within days. And the sound of a snowfall in a winter forest is something apart from all other sounds, not simply quiet. The snow absorbs sound, taking the small ambient noises of the forest interior into its soft and porous structure and holding them there, muffled and diminished, so that the forest during a heavy snowfall becomes quieter than it has been at any other point in the year, quieter than the deepest summer night, quieter than the calm of any autumn evening, a quiet with a particular quality to it, dense and soft and surrounding, the way quiet feels in a room with thick walls and no wind outside, a quiet that enters the body through the ears and seems to extend inward, past the point of simple silence, into something very close to rest. Allow that quiet to settle around you now. Allow the image of the snow-covered winter forest to rest softly in whatever part of the mind holds images in the dark. The bare branches above, each one holding its thin and patient line of accumulated snow. The forest floor below, covered in the deep and undisturbed white of a heavy snowfall. The leaf litter of autumn buried completely. The intricate surface of the forest floor smoothed over into one simple and continuous plane of unbroken white. And the trunks, dark against all that whiteness, standing in their patient rows, their bark cooled to the temperature of the air around them, their cambium barely moving, their roots still and cold in the frozen soil below. The mycorrhizal network is still there, beneath the snow and the frozen surface of the ground, in the deepest and warmest layers of the soil. Warmest being a relative term in a winter forest, meaning simply the layers insulated enough by the depth of earth above them to remain above freezing. The fungal threads persist, slowed almost to stillness, but present, connected still to the root tips of the trees above, maintaining, in the most minimal possible way, the partnership that has sustained this forest through every winter it has ever experienced. The trade has not ended. It has simply been reduced to its most essential minimum. A quiet maintenance of connection through the cold months. A slow and patient holding of the threads until the warmth returns, and the light lengthens, and the cambium stirs, and the first new cells of the next growing season begin, one quiet morning in early spring, to divide, and the mother trees are still standing, their trunks full of the resources they drew back from their leaves before the fall, the nitrogen stored in their deepest wood, the carbon held in the chemistry of their roots, all of it waiting, patient, to be sent outward again through the mycorrhizal network, to the seedlings, to the young trees growing in the forest around them. When the network wakes, when the warmth returns, when the long, slow, ancient conversation of the forest resumes, the night is very deep here, the snow is very still, the branches above us are very quiet, and somewhere in the frozen soil beneath the snow beneath our feet, the pale fungal threads are still there, still connected, still waiting, in the deep and patient dark, as they have always waited, through every winter that has ever come to this forest, through every long and cold and quiet night, simply there, simply waiting, still. The winter has been very long, very still, very patient, in the way that only a forest winter can be patient, not waiting for something to happen, but simply existing in its own deep and undisturbed quiet. The snow holding its soft and unbroken surface over the frozen ground, the bare branches holding their thin lines of accumulated ice against a sky that has been pale and cold and offering very little for a very long time. But something has changed. Not today, not this week even, not in any single moment that could be pointed to and named as the moment things shifted. It began weeks ago, in the smallest and most invisible of ways, in the most hidden and most patient layer of the forest, in a place that no eye has ever looked and no hand has ever reached, deep beneath the bark of the trees standing around us in the dark, in the living layer between the wood and the outer covering of the trunk, in the cells of the cambium, which have been held in their long winter stillness since the last warmth of the previous autumn, waiting with the complete and ancient patience of living things that have been waiting through winters for longer than the word winter has existed. Something has changed in those cells, and the forest, quietly and without any announcement, has begun its long, slow turning back toward the light. Allow your breathing to grow very slow and very easy here. Allow the weight of your body to settle fully into wherever it rests tonight. The forest is still dark around us. The ground is still cold. The branches above are still bare against the night sky. And yet, within the trunks standing quietly in the dark around us, something is beginning to move, something that has not moved since autumn, something that carries within it slow and patient, rising the entire promise of the spring that is still weeks away. To understand what is happening within these trees tonight, we need to begin with light. Not the full and generous light of a summer afternoon, with the canopy in full leaf and the forest floor dappled in shifting pools of warmth. Something far subtler than that, a lengthening. The days have been growing longer since the winter solstice, since the single shortest day of the year, when the light reached its minimum and began, imperceptibly, to return. In the first weeks after the solstice, this lengthening is so small as to be almost unmeasurable by any ordinary means of observation. A minute more of daylight, perhaps two, spread across the full span of a winter day that is still cold and pale, and offering very little that looks like the approach of spring. And yet the trees know, not in any way that resembles knowing as we experience it, but in the deeply precise and exquisitely sensitive way that the cells of a living tree experience light. Through photoreceptors embedded in the tissue just beneath the bark, chemical structures so finely calibrated that they respond to changes in the ratio of light to dark that no human eye or instrument would notice without very careful measurement. These cells have been counting, in their quiet, chemical way, through every short winter day. They have been registering the ratio of light to dark, comparing it to the ratio of the day before, and holding that comparison in the slow and patient language of their own biochemistry. And now, after weeks of registering a ratio that was slightly less unfavorable than the day before, the accumulated signal has crossed a threshold. Not a dramatic threshold, not a switch that flips all at once, simply a slow accumulation of small signals, building towards something, the way a tide builds without any single wave being the tide. The threshold has been crossed, and the trees have begun. What begins first is almost entirely invisible, deep within the root system, in the fine and branching root tips that have been held in the cold stillness of the frozen soil through the long winter months. Something stirs. The soil around the root tips has begun, in the warmest and most sheltered layers, to thaw. Not at the surface. The surface is still frozen, still carrying the last of the winter's ice in the top layer of the ground, but deeper, insulated by the depth of earth above it. And in the places where the snow cover has acted as its own insulating blanket over the soil beneath, the temperature has risen just barely, just fractionally, to the point where the ice crystals in the soil moisture have begun to give way, and the water that was locked within them, released from its frozen stillness, has begun to move, slowly, through the soil, toward the root tips. The roots draw it in, through the fine membranes of the root tip cells, through the process of osmosis, the gentle, physics-driven movement of water from where it is more abundant to where it is less, across a permeable membrane, driven by no pump and no pressure, but simply by the patient logic of molecules moving toward equilibrium. The water enters the root, and as it enters, it begins to create something, pressure. Not the violent pressure of a pump forcing liquid through a pipe against resistance. Something far quieter than that. Something that builds so slowly and so gently that if you were to sit beside a tree and simply watch, you would see nothing at all happening for days and weeks. A hydraulic pressure generated by the continuous and slow entry of water into the root system from the thawing soil, building upward through the tissue of the trunk in a column of fluid that must travel against gravity from the root tips in the cold ground all the way to the highest branches above. The column rises by millimeters over hours, by centimeters over days, moving through the xylem, the long, slender channels within the wood, running in parallel columns from root to branch tip, each one narrower than a human hair, in a slow and continuous upward flow that carries, dissolved within it, the sugars that the tree stored in its root system through the previous autumn. This is the sap rising, not the dramatic, rushing, visible flow of liquid that the word rising might suggest. Something far slower than that. Something that moves at a pace measured in centimeters per hour in the coldest early weeks of the thaw, building gradually to something faster as the weeks progress and the warmth increases, and the hydraulic pressure within the tree's vascular system grows stronger with the lengthening days. But tonight, in these earliest and most tender weeks of the forest's slow turning, the sap is moving at its most careful and most deliberate pace. rising through the narrow channels of the xylem with a patience that mirrors the patience of the winter itself, carrying its dissolved sugars upward toward branches that are still bare, toward buds that are still tightly closed, toward the cambium cells that have been dormant since autumn and that are even now just barely beginning to register the combination of lengthening light and rising hydraulic pressure that will, in time, signal them to begin dividing again. Settle even further into the quiet here. The forest is very still. The trunks around us are very dark in the winter night. And within each of them, in the xylem channels too small to see, the sap is moving upward, very slowly, carrying its quiet cargo of dissolved sugars toward the branches above. In the same way it has risen through these same trunks, or the trunks of the trees that stood in this place before these ones, every spring, for as long as this ground has been forest ground, rising, without urgency, without any awareness of what it is rising toward, simply following the patient physics of pressure and osmosis, and the slow thermodynamics of a forest thaw. And in the branches above, something is happening that matches the slowness of the sap's rising with a slowness of its own. The buds have been there since autumn. They formed in the final weeks of the growing season, small and tightly packed, protected within layers of overlapping scales that are themselves coated in a waxy, resinous material, a natural weatherproofing as ancient and as precisely made as anything the forest has ever produced, sealed against the frost, against the drying cold of winter wind, against the ice that will press against their surfaces through the long months ahead. Within each bud, folded so tightly that the entire content of what will become a leaf, with all its veins and all its surface and all the chemical complexity of a fully formed structure, has been compressed into a space barely visible to the naked eye. The next season's leaves are waiting. They have been waiting since autumn, through every cold night of the winter, through every morning when the frost lay heavy on the branches and the ice crackled in the frozen bark above the snow line. They have been waiting, sealed within their protective scales, for a signal that they cannot receive until both conditions are met, both the lengthening of the days and the arrival of the warmth, the light and the temperature together, the combination that tells the bud's chemistry that the season it was built for has finally come. The lengthening of the days, as we have already followed, began weeks ago. It has been building since the solstice, accumulating day by day in the tissue of the tree, registered and held in the slow chemical language of the photoreceptors beneath the bark. But warmth has been slower to come. The days have grown longer, but the nights have remained cold, and the soil has remained largely frozen, and the signal from the light alone has not been sufficient to unlock what is held within the bud. And so the buds have continued to wait, growing very slightly with each week that passes, not visibly, not in any way that a casual observation of the bare branches would reveal, but measurably in the slow rounding of their shape, in the barely perceptible softening of the outer scales, in the first faint hints of color beginning to show through the waxy covering of the outermost layer, a deepening of the brown into something with a faint, warm undertone, a suggestion of the green that lies just beneath. The sap is reaching them now, the slow upward column of sugar water rising through the xylem channels from the root system far below has been building its pressure in the branches for days and weeks. And the cells within the bud, receiving this pressure, receiving also the continued signal of the lengthening light, are responding so slowly, so quietly, with such complete unhurriedness that to watch a single bud swell on any single day would tell you almost nothing. But across the span of weeks, the bud is becoming something slightly larger than it was, slightly rounder, slightly softer at its sealed tip. the scales are beginning to separate by fractions too small to measure without instruments at their edges, and the compressed leaf within, receiving the first molecules of sugar water carried up from the roots below, is beginning the earliest and most tentative stages of its long expansion. There is a word in the language of forest ecology for the moment when a bud finally opens, when the scales part and the compressed leaf within begins to unfurl. Bud burst. It sounds more dramatic than it is. It sounds like something that happens suddenly, in a single moment, a visible and decisive opening. But the reality of it is as slow and as quiet and as patient as everything else the forest does. The scales do not part all at once. They loosen gradually over the course of days, the seal between them softening incrementally as the tissue beneath expands. And the leaf within does not emerge quickly or dramatically, or in a way that any observer watching on any single day would be able to clearly distinguish from the day before. It simply grows, fraction by fraction, pushing the scales apart from within by the sheer patient pressure of its own expansion, until one morning, and it is always a morning, in the particular way that these thresholds tend to be crossed in the cool stillness before the full warmth of the day. The tip of the emerging leaf is visible at the bud's apex, a fraction of green, less than a millimeter, barely there. The first visible sign of what has been building in the slow and invisible way of all forest processes, since the moment the solstice turned and the days began their long return toward warmth. Let your thoughts drift very gently now. There is nothing more that needs to be followed tonight. Simply the dark branches above us, simply the cold and quiet forest floor beneath. And within the trunks, in the xylem channels we will never see, the sap is still rising. Very slowly, very quietly, carrying its dissolved sugars upward through the channels of the wood, toward the buds above, which are waiting, as they have always waited, as they will always wait, for the morning that is coming, that is always, in the long and patient calendar of the forest, coming. The night is very deep, the branches are very still, and in a bud so small you could hold a dozen in your palm, a leaf that has been folded since autumn is pressing, very gently, against the scales above it. Not yet, but soon, simply waiting, in the quiet, in the dark, in the deep and ancient patience of a forest that has been doing exactly this in exactly this way through every winter it has ever known. The sap rises, very slowly. The buds wait, simply here, simply still, in the long and undisturbed quiet of the winter forest, turning very gently toward the light. Something has changed in the forest this morning, not dramatically, not in any way that announces itself above a whisper. But if you have been here through all the long and patient chapters of this forest's year, through the slow chemistry of the autumn, through the deep and undisturbed quiet of the winter stillness, through the barely perceptible beginnings of the sap's long rising, you will feel it. The air is different. Not warmer exactly, though the warmth is coming, and the days are long enough now that the light reaches into the lower canopy in ways it could not manage even a few weeks ago. Something in the quality of the light itself has changed. It is no longer the thin and pale and searching light of the early spring, moving between bare branches with too much freedom, too much openness, reaching the forest floor with none of the softening and filtering and gentle interruption of a full canopy above. It is becoming something else, something the forest floor has not felt since last autumn, when the leaves fell and the sky came all the way down through the bare branches into the interior. The canopy is returning. Allow yourself to settle fully into wherever you rest tonight. Allow the gentle weight of all these slow and patient hours of forest listening to rest within you, the way the leaf litter rests on the forest floor, accumulated, layer upon quiet layer, softening everything it covers. The night around you is very still. And in the forest we have been traveling through together, through all these long and unhurried chapters, something is completing itself tonight. The great unfurling has begun. In the days after the first bud burst, after that first barely visible fraction of green appeared at the tip of the sealed bud, pushing through the parting scales in its infinitely patient way, the process did not stop. It simply continued, as it has always continued, in the slow and deliberate way of everything this forest does. The scales that had sealed the bud through the long winter months parted further, day by day, fraction by patient fraction, allowing the compressed leaf within to push outward into the available space with a pressure so gentle and so continuous that the scales seemed less to be forced apart than simply to yield, to release, one by one, their winter grip, the way ice releases its grip on a stone at the water's edge as the temperature rises, not breaking but simply softening until the thing that was held is quietly free, and the leaf that emerges from this long, slow opening is, in its first hours and days, something entirely unlike the broad and confident green surface it will become. It is pale, not the deep, absorptive green of a mature leaf in full summer. Something much closer to the color of new growth everywhere in the natural world. A soft and almost luminous yellow-green, faintly translucent, the color of light, passing through a thin and living surface that has not yet fully assembled all the chemistry it will need for its complete and productive life. It is soft, too. The cell walls of a newly emerged leaf have not yet thickened into the firm and waxy surface of a mature leaf, the surface that will, by midsummer, be resilient enough to shed rain and resist the wind without any visible flexing. Right now, in these first days of its existence in the open air, the leaf is almost impossibly delicate, thin enough that the pattern of veins within it is visible when the light passes through it from behind, flexible enough that the slightest movement of air causes it to bend and shimmer, pale enough that the light it receives passes through it as much as it is absorbed, a leaf still becoming what it will be, still assembling the chemistry of its full function, still finding its way, gently and without urgency, into the complete and productive form it will hold through the long, warm months ahead. And it is reaching. This, perhaps, is the most quietly remarkable thing about a newly emerged leaf in the first days of the unfurling. The leaf does not simply emerge and hold still, it reaches. The petiole, the slender stem connecting the leaf to the branch, begins from the very first hours of the leaf's emergence to orient itself in response to the available light. Phototropism, the process is called, the slow bending of a growing plant toward its light source. And in a newly emerged spring leaf, still soft and pale, and almost luminous in the thin spring warmth, this bending is visible across the span of hours in a way that a mature summer leaf, its growth long since complete, can never show. You could sit beside a Yeun Dupri leaf in the early morning and return at the end of the afternoon and see, without any measurement or instrument, that it has moved, that its face has turned gently toward the best available light, that it has oriented itself with the complete and patient precision of living chemistry toward exactly the angle that will allow it to absorb the most light across the longest portion of the day. Settle a little deeper into the quiet here. The forest is very still around us, and above us, on the branches of every tree in every direction, the pale and delicate leaves of the spring unfurling are reaching, in their slow and patient way, toward whatever light the new morning will bring. Not urgently, not with any visible haste, simply orienting, the way everything in this forest orients. Not by deciding, not by trying, but by following the quiet and ancient logic of its own chemistry. The way that the sap rises, not because the tree decides to send it upward, but because the physics of pressure and osmosis carry it there without any instruction at all. The way the mycorrhizal threads drift through the soil, not because the fungi choose a direction, but because the chemical gradients of the soil guide them, as reliably and as completely as gravity guides water down a slope. And now, as the pale leaves reach for the light above and begin, in their first tentative days of full exposure, to assemble the chlorophyll that will make them green, the deep and absorptive green of a leaf in full summer productivity, something begins to happen far below them, far below the branches, far below the trunk, below the surface of the forest floor, in the soil, in the pale and patient mycorrhizal threads that have been held in their long winter minimum of activity through all the cold and dark months, maintaining their connections at the quietest possible level, waiting for a signal that the conditions had changed. The signal arrives. A leaf that has begun to photosynthesize. A leaf that has assembled enough chlorophyll to begin absorbing light and converting it into sugar, even in its early, incomplete, pale green form, immediately begins to send that sugar downward, through the petiole into the branch, through the branch into the trunk, through the trunk downward into the root system, a flow of fresh carbon, newly made, carrying within it the energy of the spring sunlight that the leaf has absorbed and converted with the quiet alchemy of photosynthesis. And this flow, thin at first, barely a fraction of what it will become when the canopy is fully established and every leaf is working at the full capacity of its summer productivity, reaches the root tips, reaches the points of contact between the tree's root system and the mycorrhizal network, and enters the fungal threads. For the fungi, this arriving carbon is the first real nourishment they have received since the previous autumn. Through the long winter months, the threads persisted on the reserves held within them, maintaining their connections at the minimum necessary level, waiting without urgency in the cold and frozen soil. But now, with the first fresh carbon arriving from the new spring leaves above, the fungal threads respond, not quickly, in the way that an animal responds to food, not with any sudden increase in activity or any visible change that the eye could follow, but in the way that mycorrhizal threads have always responded to the arrival of carbon, slowly, with a gradual increase in metabolic activity. A slow warming of the chemistry within the threads, a beginning of the division and extension of new hyphal tissue, new pale threads extending outward from the existing network into the soil that surrounds them, probing in their slow and directionless way toward the mineral sources that the waking trees above will need in increasing quantities as the spring proceeds. The network is waking, and it does not wake all at once. It wakes the way the forest always does anything, from the innermost and most connected parts outward, from the places where carbon has been arriving the longest to the places still waiting at the furthest reaches of the network for the slow signal to reach them. The threads closest to the root tips of the largest trees, the mother trees, whose root systems are the deepest and most extensive, whose connection to the network is the richest and most multiply connected. These threads wake first. They receive the arriving carbon first. They begin extending new growth first. And through their activity, they begin to restore the full conductivity of the pathways through which carbon and water and minerals have always moved. From them, the signal travels outward, along the existing threads, to the trees connected to the mother trees through the network, to the seedlings growing in the shade beneath the canopy, to the smaller and younger trees still waiting on the network's periphery for the carbon that will allow them to begin their own spring productivity. The forest is waking up, not loudly, not dramatically, in the slow and patient way that the forest has always woken up from every winter that has ever come to it. From the top down and from the center outward, from the first pale leaves reaching for the light in the high canopy, to the carbon flowing down through the trunks, to the mycorrhizal threads waking in the deep soil, to the seedlings on the forest floor beginning finally to receive the nourishment that will sustain them through their own first weeks of spring growth. The whole forest moving together, in the quiet and unhurried way it has always moved. And above us, the canopy is filling, day by day. The pale and delicate leaves of the early unfurling, deepening now from their first soft yellow-green into something more confident, more absorptive, more fully committed to the work of the season. The chlorophyll assembling itself, molecule by careful molecule, in the leaf tissue. The leaves expanding, their cell walls thickening very slightly with each passing day. The surface of each leaf becoming firmer, waxy, the deep and reliable green of a leaf that has found its full summer form. And the gaps in the canopy, those open spaces between the bare branches through which the winter sky came all the way down into the forest interior. Those pale and searching openings through which the cold light fell without interruption are closing, one leaf at a time, one branch at a time, one slow and patient day at a time. The canopy is drawing itself back together, and the forest floor is changing with it. The light that has been falling freely through the open winter canopy, reaching the leaf litter and the mosses and the small plants of the understory in a direct and unfiltered way, is beginning to be interrupted. The first leaves catch it, absorb some of it, scatter the rest downward in the beginning of the komarebi. Those soft and shifting pools of dappled light that we remember from our very first chapter, from the first gentle hour of this long forest journey, when we crossed the tree line and walked into the cool and scented interior and watched the light move across the forest floor in its slow and breathing pattern. It is returning, the komarebi is returning, softly, patch by patient patch. As each new cluster of leaves fills another gap in the canopy above, the direct light on the forested floor below gives way to a softer, more complex illumination. The particular quality of light inside a full canopy, broken and filtered and softened by the countless surfaces of countless individual leaves, shifting gently as the leaves move in the slow air above. Not the flat and searching light of the open winter. Something warmer, something more enclosed, something that carries within it the particular and ancient quality of safety that a full forest canopy has always provided to anything resting in the shade below it. The forest is closing around us again, not closing like a closing door, closing like a held hand, closing like the warmth of a room whose curtains have been gently drawn. The canopy above us is deepening. The sky, which was so fully visible through the bare branches of the winter months, is becoming something glimpsed in fragments again, pale shapes between leaves, shifting almost imperceptibly, the komarebi moving across the forest floor in its slow and breathing arc, and the air beneath the canopy has changed. The terpenes are back, rising again from the leaves above in their quiet and ancient chemistry. The smell of the forest interior in full spring leaf, green and slightly sweet, and carrying within it the particular compounds that have been drifting through forest air for hundreds of millions of years, reaching the nervous systems of every animal that has ever breathed beneath the full canopy and settling there as the oldest and most deeply embedded signal of shelter and safety that the living world has ever produced. The forest floor is cool again, the way it was cool when we first arrived, when we first stepped across the tree line and felt the temperature shift around us. That gentle and immediate yielding of the warmth, the air carrying the quiet coolness of a place that has been shaded and undisturbed all day. It is here again. The full canopy is almost complete, and the mycorrhizal network below us is fully awake. The threads are extending. The trade of minerals and carbon is flowing in all its spring abundance through the pale connections beneath the forest floor. The mother trees are sending their nourishment outward to the seedlings. The seedlings are growing slowly in the dappled shade of the returning canopy. The sap is high in every trunk around us. The rings of this year are forming, cell by cell, in the living layer just beneath the bark, and the leaves above are doing what they have always done in the long, warm heart of the growing season, absorbing the light, releasing the oxygen, drifting their ancient chemistry on the slow air of the forest interior, talking to one another in the quiet and invisible way they have always talked. Everything has returned: the canopy, the komarebi, the terpenes in the cool and enclosed air, the mycorrhizal trade in the dark soil below, the mother trees sending their abundance outward through the threads. We have traveled through the whole of this forest's year together, from the warm and scented arrival at the tree line in the long evenings of summer, through the slow autumn chemistry of the retreating leaves, through the deep and undisturbed stillness of the winter, with the snow lying soft and unbroken across the frozen ground, through the first invisible lengthening of the light, through the slow rising of the sap, through the pale and delicate first days of the unfurling, and back here, back to the full canopy, back to the cool and enclosed interior, back to the komarebi moving across the forest floor in its slow and breathing pattern. The forest has completed its year, as it completes every year, quietly, without announcement, without any moment that could be named as the moment of completion, simply continuing, as the forest always continues. The leaves above are very still now, the canopy is very full, the air beneath it is very cool, and the forest floor in the slow and dappled light is exactly as it was when we first arrived, soft and enclosed and ancient and entirely at rest. Simply here, as it has always been here, as it will always be here. The trees are still saying something. They have never stopped. They will never stop. Listen very quietly if you can, or simply rest here, in the cool, in the dappled dark, in the forest that has been holding this silence for longer than any of us have been here to rest within it. The leaves are very still. The canopy is very full. And you are already, very nearly, somewhere else entirely, through the cool and scented air of the tree line, where we first crossed from the open world into something quieter and older, and far more patient than anything we had left behind, through the pale mycorrhizal threads running in their slow and invisible directions, through the dark soil beneath our feet, through the mother trees, sending their quiet abundance outward, through the network to the seedlings growing in their shade, through the language of the leaves, drifting on still air in the ancient chemistry of terpenes and slow molecular conversation, through the extraordinary patience of the bristlecone pine, 4,850 years old, still alive tonight on its cold and windswept slope, through the deep stillness of the winter forest, with the snow lying soft and unbroken across the frozen ground and the sap waiting in the root system for the lengthening of the days, through the slow rising of the sap and the pale and delicate first days of the unfurling, and the great return of the canopy to its full and breathing completeness. We have travelled through the whole of this forest's year, and now we have arrived at the last place this journey goes. Not deeper, not further, simply here, in the quiet, in the cool and dappled dark beneath the full canopy, resting in the oldest question this forest carries within it. The question it has never answered and has never needed to answer, and will continue to not answer long after tonight has passed into the long and patient accumulation of all the nights that came before it. Allow your body to grow very heavy now. Allow the weight of it to settle fully into the surface beneath you, the way the fallen leaf settles into the forest floor, completely, without reservation, without any part of it remaining separate from the ground that receives it. There is nothing more to follow tonight, nothing more to understand. No further layer of the forest waiting to be explored. Only this last, wide, unanswered question, and the quiet that holds it, and the soft, breathing dark of the canopy above. What does the forest know? It is not a question that science has answered. It is not a question that science has even in any complete sense, fully asked yet. Because to ask it properly would require a kind of patience that the ordinary pace of scientific inquiry, working in years, in decades, in the span of a single researcher's career, has difficulty finding in a subject that operates in centuries. But the question is there, waiting in the data, waiting in the records of carbon isotopes moving between trees, waiting in the preferential routing of resources towards seedlings that carry the same genetic material as the mother tree above them, waiting in the slow, unmistakable pattern of a forest that behaves, in certain measurable ways, as though it knows something, as though it knows its own, as though it knows when the season is turning, not from a calendar, not from a memory of previous springs, but from the slow accumulation of chemical signals, building day by day in the tissue of the photoreceptors beneath the bark, toward a threshold that is not set by any single cell, and not decided by any central intelligence, and not calculated by anything that could be called a mind. And yet it is reached, every year, with extraordinary reliability, as though something, somewhere within the distributed and ancient intelligence of a living tree, knows when the time has come, as though it knows, too, when something has changed in the air, when the chemistry of a neighboring tree has shifted, when the signal drifting on the still forest air carries something different from the quiet baseline of an ordinary undisturbed afternoon. And the leaves receive this signal, and the chemistry within those leaves changes in response. Before anything has reached them, before anything has changed in their immediate surroundings, simply because the air between them and their neighbor carries a message that something, somewhere in the distributed and silent chemistry of a living leaf, is capable of reading. What is it to read something without a mind to read it with? We do not know. Science does not know. It is one of the quietest and most persistent open questions in the whole of plant biology, not whether the reading happens. The evidence for that is clear and consistent and replicable. But what the reading is, whether it constitutes anything resembling awareness, whether the word know applies to a process that achieves the same result as knowing through chemistry and pressure and the slow logic of molecules responding to other molecules, without any brain involved anywhere in the chain. The forest does not answer this question, it simply continues, in the only way it knows how to continue, slowly, without urgency, adding one ring to the year's growth, sending one small fraction of carbon downward through the xylem toward the root tips, extending one new hyphal thread through one new fraction of the soil, orienting one new leaf by the slow and patient logic of phototropism toward the best available angle of the available light, simply continuing as it has always continued. And perhaps that is, in its own way, a kind of answer, not to the question of what the forest knows, but to the question of whether knowing, in the way we usually mean when we use that word, is the only kind of knowing that matters. There is a tree in a forest in New Zealand that has been kept alive for decades by the trees around it. We met it at the beginning of this long journey together. The stump with no leaves and no canopy and no capacity for photosynthesis of its own, still alive, still receiving, through the mycorrhizal network, the carbon and the water that the living trees around it pass quietly and continuously through the pale threads connecting their roots to what remains of its own. Why do they do this? Science does not know. There is no obvious advantage to the living trees in maintaining the chemical connection to a stump that has not produced its own carbon in decades. There is no clear evolutionary logic that rewards the expenditure of resources on a neighbor that cannot return anything in exchange. And yet the resources continue to flow. The connection remains intact. The stump lives. Perhaps the network simply does not distinguish between a root that is producing carbon and a root that is not. Perhaps the chemical signature of the stump's root system is similar enough to the signatures of the living roots around it that the network continues to treat it as it has always treated it, as a node, connected, part of the whole, receiving whatever the whole has available to send. Perhaps it is nothing more than that. Or perhaps there is something in the long and patient logic of a mycorrhizal network that has been routing resources through a particular set of connections for decades, accumulating the chemical habit of those particular connections. That makes the continued maintenance of them something closer to the default than the conscious choice. The network simply continuing to do what it has always done, in the quiet and unhurried way that the forest does everything. We do not need to resolve this tonight. The stump does not need us to resolve it either. It is simply there, in its forest, in the dark, still alive, still connected, still receiving, through the pale threads beneath the soil, the quiet generosity of the trees around it. Whether that generosity is known or unknowing, whether it is intention or chemistry, whether the word care applies to a process that achieves the same result as care through the silent logic of a network that has never been asked to justify itself. Allow your thoughts to grow very soft now. Allow them to drift the way terpenes drift from a leaf at rest, outward, without direction, dispersing into the cool air around them, becoming part of the atmosphere, carrying their quiet signal in whatever slow and invisible direction the night has arranged for them to travel. The forest has been asking these questions longer than we have. The mycorrhizal network has been routing its resources through its ancient and intricate connections since long before any human mind arrived to wonder about the logic of what it was doing. The mother trees have been sending their carbon toward their own seedlings since long before the word mother existed in any language spoken on this earth. The leaves have been reading the chemistry of their neighbor's distress and adjusting their own chemistry in response since long before anyone was here to observe the process and begin the long, slow work of trying to understand it. The forest has always known whatever it knows, in its own quiet way, in its own ancient language, through the pale threads and the rising sap, and the slow spiral of the wood, and the patient, barely perceptible turning of the leaves toward the light, and it will continue knowing it, through every night that follows this one, through every winter and every spring and every long, full summer and every gentle autumn release of leaves that will accumulate into the soft and patient litter of all the winters still to come, long after night, long after any of this has been fully understood, long after every question we have carried through these chapters has been either answered or gently set aside. The forest will still be here, still conducting its slow and ancient conversation through the dark soil, still sending its carbon upward through the xylem in the long weeks of the spring thaw, still releasing its terpenes into the cool interior air of the canopy, still routing its quiet abundance through the mycorrhizal threads toward the smallest and youngest and most vulnerable of the lives connected to its network, simply continuing, as it has always continued, in the undisturbed dark, in the cool and patient quiet, in the ancient and breathing stillness of a forest that has never once been asked to explain itself, and has never once needed to. The canopy is very still above us now. The leaf litter is very soft beneath us, and the network in the dark soil below is carrying whatever it carries, as it always carries it, in the dark, in the quiet, in the slow and ancient way of everything this forest has ever done. Rest here now, simply here, in the forest, in the dark, in the quiet that has been here since long before tonight, and will be here long after. The forest knows, in whatever way the forest knows, and that is enough. We have arrived at the last place this journey goes, not further in, not deeper down, simply here, in the quiet that has been waiting at the end of this long and patient night, holding itself with the same undisturbed stillness that the forest has always held everything within it. The chapters are behind us now, the mycorrhizal threads and the mother trees, and the language of the leaves and the long patience of the bristlecone pine, and the deep winter stillness and the slow rising of the sap and the pale and delicate unfurling of the spring, and the great returning of the canopy, and the ancient unanswered question of what the forest knows. All of it behind us. All of it settled now into the soft and wordless place where things go when they have been fully received and can be released. And what remains when all of it has been released is simply this: the forest. Simply the forest. The canopy above us is very full tonight, every leaf in its place, every branch holding its quiet geometry against the dark sky above. The light that reaches us here has passed through so many layers of green that it carries almost nothing of its original brightness, only a soft and diffused presence, more a quality of the air than a quantity of illumination, settling across the forest floor in the gentle and irregular way that light settles everywhere in this enclosed and ancient space. The komarebi, still moving, still shifting very slowly as the highest leaves turn in whatever barely perceptible current moves through the canopy tonight, still breathing the way it has always breathed. The air is cool here, not cold, simply cool in the particular way of a forest interior that has been enclosed and undisturbed through the long hours of the night, the temperature settling gradually toward the stable and quiet equilibrium that the canopy above maintains with the patient constancy of something that has been doing exactly this for a very long time. It carries this air the last slow traces of the terpene release from the leaves above, faint now, much fainter than they were in the full warmth of the afternoon, when the leaves were in the highest productive hours of their day, and the chemistry of the forest air was at its most complete and most abundant, but still present, still drifting, in whatever slow and nearly still direction the night has arranged for them, still reaching, in their quiet and ancient way, the places within you that have always known how to receive them. Breathe in very softly. Allow the air of this forest to settle into you with whatever ease your body finds tonight. There is no particular depth required, no particular pace, simply the breath, moving in and out in the way it moves when there is nothing asked of it. The way it moves, perhaps, in the very deepest and most undisturbed hours of sleep, when the body has finally set down everything it has been carrying, and the mind has finally released everything it has been holding, and there is only the breathing, quiet, slow, going on by itself. The forest floor beneath us is very soft. Layers of leaf litter accumulated across many autumns, each layer softer than the one above it. The oldest and deepest layers having spent so many years in the slow and patient work of decomposition that they have become something closer to soil than to leaf, dark and rich and fine, and carrying within them the chemical memory of everything that has ever fallen here and slowly returned to the earth from which it came. The moss, where it grows along the base of the nearest trunk, is very still, each small upright shoot in its exact position, the moisture held within each shoot's tissue in the quiet, suspended way that moss holds moisture, not flowing, not moving, simply present, distributed through the fine and ancient structure of the moss, the way water is distributed through a sleeping forest in the deep stillness of the night. The nearest trunk is very close. You could reach out and touch the bark if you wished. The bark is cool, slightly rough in the irregular, varied way of old bark. Not uniformly rough, not aggressively so, but textured with the long record of its own slow growth, the small ridges and shallow furrows that have developed across the years as the trunk beneath has expanded, almost imperceptibly, in its continuous and unhurried outward movement. Beneath that bark, in the narrow living layer of the cambium, the cells are very still tonight, not dividing, not adding to the ring of this year's growth, simply present, holding the connection between the deep wood and the inner bark, waiting with the complete patience of cells that have been waiting through every night of every year of this tree's long existence, for the warmth and light that will eventually, slowly, call them back to their quiet work. And below the bark, below the cambium, below the layers of wood laid down across the years, below the root system extending through the cool and quiet soil, below the surface of the forest floor, in the dark, in the cold, in the fine and patient threads running in every direction at once through the earth beneath us, the network is still there, still carrying, still connecting, still moving, in its slow and barely perceptible way, whatever it has always moved through the pale channels of its own ancient structure. You do not need to know anything more about it tonight. You have already known enough, more than enough, more perhaps, than the forest has ever needed you to know. The forest does not require understanding. It has never required understanding. It simply continues, in the dark, in the quiet, in the cool and undisturbed stillness of its own long and patient existence. And you are here within it, simply here, the canopy above, the soft ground beneath, the cool air carrying its last faint terpenes in whatever slow and invisible direction the night has chosen, the threads below drifting through the dark soil in their ancient and unhurried directions, the nearest trunk very still, the moss very still, everything very still, a single leaf somewhere above, turning very slightly on its stem, in the faintest possible movement of the night air, and then settling, back into stillness, back into the complete and ancient quiet of the forest at rest. The forest is breathing, very slowly. You are breathing, very slowly. The two rhythms, the forest's and yours, resting in the same cool and undisturbed air, the same dark, the same old, patient, breathing quiet. The trees are still saying something, very quietly, in whatever language trees have always spoken, in the dark soil, in the pale threads, in the slow and invisible drift of molecules on still air. You do not need to hear it tonight. Simply rest in the fact of it, that the conversation continues, that it has always continued, that it will continue long after tonight, long after any of this. The forest is still here, the leaves are very still, the threads are very still, the air is very still, and you are very nearly somewhere else entirely, simply the forest, simply the dark, simply the quiet, simply still.